Spectrovision Radio.
The 1970s marked a turning point in the history of UFO encounters. It was a decade where the mystery in our skies moved from distant lights and fleeting shapes to deeply personal experiences. Abductions, missing time, and contact with entities that defied comprehension or known origins. Across small towns, lonely highways, and quiet suburban streets, ordinary people begin to report extraordinary encounters. From the haunting case of Steve Kilburn in Maryland to the bizarre Meccano Mummy incident in North Dakota and the repeated terrifying abductions of Pier Zanfretta in Italy. The 1970s became a defining era of contact, an age where humanity's understanding of reality, fear, and the unknown was profoundly tested. These are the Alien Abduction Files of the 1970s.
While our government's official position is not to speculate on this subject, we can choose to let our minds explore other possibilities, to use our imaginations. For if we consider that astroscientists agree on one point, that the possibility of life elsewhere is not only quite probable, some feel it is there without a doubt. Let us suppose then that these objects are real space vehicles, extraterrestrial in origin, and not an illusion of the mind.
I'm Ryan Sprague, and you are now somewhere in the skies. Steve Kilburn's story didn't begin with a flash of light in the sky or a mysterious craft descending from above. It began with a feeling, a suffocating, inexplicable dread that would consume him whenever he thought about or drove along a lonely stretch of road in rural Maryland. It wasn't a fear of the dark or being alone, but something deeper, more primal, as though the land itself was haunted by a memory his conscious mind just could not reach. For years, Kilburn tried to ignore it. He would take detours, change his route, or make excuses not to travel at night at all. Yet no matter how far he tried to run from the uneasy stretch of Route 40, this feeling clung to him. It returned in his dreams, in flashes of emotion without imagery. Just a cold weight pressing on his chest, a strange humming in his ears, the echo of something unfinished. It was not until the late 1970s, when he met UFO researcher Bud Hopkins, that the alleged truth of that road began to reveal itself. Bud Hopkins was already becoming a central figure in the study of so-called alien abductions, gathering accounts of missing time experiences from people all across the United States.
The abduction phenomenon is worldwide. People describe the aliens who do the abductions very similarly. This is not fantasy, but this is reality. These people are actually seeing these alien figures inside the UFO. I've worked with military officers who have had abduction experiences, who have been taken into UFOs, a full colonel in the American Army recently. I've worked with people who were police officers, a NASA scientist, a number of people who have had these experiences who have been severely frightened by them, and yet the government's policy is to deny that these experiences are real. It's been extremely harmful, and this policy we're hoping will end someday soon.
Kilburn wasn't one of those witnesses who would come forward with a wild story of flashing lights or silver discs. Instead, he told Hopkins about a feeling, a deep, bone-level terror that made absolutely no sense. Something had happened to him. He was sure of that. But the memory was locked away. hidden somewhere beyond his conscious mind. Hopkins, intrigued by this emotional intensity of the case, would end up introducing Kilburn to psychologist Dr. Gerard Franklin. Together, they would conduct a series of hypnotic regressions that would seemingly open a door to the past for Kilburn, and perhaps unfortunately would unleash one of the most chilling alien abduction accounts ever documented. In the early 1970s, Kilburn was a college student living in Baltimore. Every weekend, he would drive west to visit his girlfriend in Frederick, Maryland, following a long, quiet stretch of Route 40 that wound through open fields and patches of forest. The drive was usually peaceful, though lonely, and the road at night seemed to belong to another world. No streetlights, no other cars, just the hum of the tires and the darkness pressing in from every side. One particular night, sometime between 2 and 3 in the morning, his journey took a sinister turn. Kilburn felt an unshakable sense of being watched. And then came the light. A faint glow above the tree line, pale and steady, moving against the wind. He remembered trying to ignore it, telling himself it was a plane or a trick of his tired eyes. But as the light grew brighter, the fear grew sharper. He didn't recall the light vanishing, only that at some point, he was much further down the road, the light gone, the feeling lingering. His body trembled, and he couldn't explain why. What he never told anyone at the time was that his wristwatch had stopped completely that night. The hands on the watch froze just past 2:17 a.m., and no amount of winding could bring it back to life. For weeks afterwards, electrical devices seemed to malfunction all around him. Radios fizzed with static, light bulbs flickered when he entered a room, and his car battery died twice in just a single month. He laughed it off to friends, but the unease, it just never left. From that night onward, every drive along that stretch filled him with panic. Even years later, long after he'd moved to New York, he would wake at night sweating, haunted by that invisible presence. Something had happened there, something his conscious mind just refused to remember. But then in May of 1978, Kilburn sat in Dr. Franklin's Manhattan office, surrounded by the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and the soft crackle of a tape recorder. Hopkins and fellow UFO researcher Ted Blocker sat quietly nearby as Franklin guided Kilburn into hypnosis. At first, the memories were fragmented, scattered like broken glass. He described driving that night, the road stretching endlessly ahead, the darkness alive all around him. His eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror, though he didn't know why. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly they began to hurt. Then came the sound. A low hum that seemed to vibrate through his bones. Without realizing it, he had pulled to the side of the road. The engine idled softly, headlights cutting through the black. He remembered stepping out of the car and feeling the cold air against his face, and noticing a fence a short distance away. That is when the feeling of dread surged through him, an awareness that something was standing nearby, something unseen. And then it touched him. A cold, metallic sensation. It gripped his shoulder, tight, immovable, like a clamp locking him in place. He tried to move, to run, but his body no longer obeyed him. A flash of light hit his vision, and the next thing he knew, he was no longer on the roadside. Kilburn described the scene as impossibly strange. The world around him seemed to just shift between darkness and light. He could see the road, his car, and the fence, but everything shimmered and it was blurred around the edges. And in that flickering twilight stood 3 figures. They were small, thin, their skin the color of bone dust, almost translucent, Their heads were unusually large, their limbs frail, their movements deliberate and eerily synchronized. Their faces were featureless, except for immense black eyes that reflected the dim light like pools of oil. As they approached, Kilburn's fear had hit its peak, and then, almost mercifully, the fear just vanished. All he felt was numb, as though someone had turned off his emotions. These figures surrounded him, silent, their intentions just unknowable. One of them, taller than the others and moving with a stiff, almost pained gait, stood directly before him. He felt this intelligence emanating from this one, something vast and ancient. It raised one of its narrow, tubular hands, and Kilburn's body lifted effortlessly off the ground. He would later tell Bud Hopkins that as he rose, he glimpsed the source of light, not a ship in the conventional sense, but a geometric structure that seemed to distort the space around it. The air shimmered like heat above asphalt, and within that distortion, he could see a silver oval that pulsated, breathing with soft rhythm. The edges of the craft dissolved into the night, and the next thing Kilburn remembered was light, pure, searing, white light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The air hummed with energy, and the walls around him curved like the inside of a shell. He lay on a smooth, metallic surface that seemed to fold in on itself to his body's shape as though it was alive somehow. Around him moved several figures. Their skin seemed to glow faintly, and their motions were silent, precise, almost mechanical. A device descended from above, a disc with an arm ending in a needle-like probe. It hovered over his chest, rotating, and then stopped. Kilburn felt a sharp pressure in his back, followed by an intense but fleeting pain. He didn't scream. He couldn't scream. Because at this point, he could barely even breathe. More instruments began to appear, glinting, silver, and possibly fluid, like living metal. They examined him with clinical detachment, touching his skin with cold precision. He felt a tingling sensation run through his limbs. And though he could not move, his fear had dissolved into a strange, heavy calm. Again, as if his emotions had been switched off somehow. At the edge of the room, the taller being, the one he thought was the leader of sorts, stood motionless, watching. Kilburn sensed curiosity, even pity, radiating from it. He had the overwhelming impression that these beings were not acting out of cruelty, but duty. They were studying him, measuring him, trying to understand him. Then he thought he heard a sound, a faint rhythmic pulse that might have been communication, though it bypassed language entirely. It seemed to echo into his skull. When he focused on it, he felt a flood of imagery. There were stars, the curvature of the earth, the endless black between galaxies. And then, as suddenly as it came, the connection just broke. When he came out of hypnosis, Kilburn was drenched in sweat, trembling. The images were just too vivid to be dreams, too detailed to be fantasy. He had felt the metallic grip on his shoulder, the pain in his back, the unnatural light that erased all shadow. And yet, there was still so much he couldn't recall. Like how he returned to his car, how long he'd been gone, and why he'd been chosen for this. Hopkins and Blocker found themselves shaken as well. The consistency of Kilburn's account, the details that echoed other abduction reports, it was just uncanny. His recollections aligned with similar cases across decades. The seamless, organic interiors of the craft, the emotionless yet intelligent beings, the paralyzing calm. None of these details had been suggested to him beforehand, nor was he led at all during the hypnosis. To test the accuracy of the physical sensations Kilburn had described, Hopkins would consult a neurosurgeon by the name of Dr. Paul Cooper. After interviewing Kilburn and reviewing the transcripts, Dr. Cooper was stunned. The specific locations of the pain and the physiological reactions were, in his words, anatomically precise. No layperson could have faked that level of detail. Dr. Cooper would admit that it was the spookiest 2.5 hours of his career, and his conclusion was equally as chilling. The procedures Kilburn described were consistent with an advanced neurological examination, one designed not to harm, but to study. Cooper would tell Hopkins, "It seems like these beings wanted to find out how he worked as a human." In the weeks following the hypnosis sessions, Kilburn began experiencing vivid dreams, not of fear, but of light. He dreamt of corridors that curved into infinity, of faint humming sounds that echoed in his chest. Sometimes he would wake up and find faint red marks on his shoulders or on his back, though he never recalled how they got there. Kilburn would keep in touch with Bud Hopkins for several years, attending a handful of small conferences where he quietly spoke about his experience. He wasn't interested in fame or notoriety. In fact, he preferred anonymity. He simply wanted to understand why him, why that night, why that road. But those answers never came. What did come was a strange peace. The knowledge that the fear which had haunted him for so long, it was not madness, but memory. Something had indeed happened to him, and even if the world refused to believe it, he could no longer deny it. Today, Kilburn's encounter remains one of the most compelling and psychologically rich cases in the annals of all UFO abduction research. It's not the spectacle of lights or saucers that makes it powerful, but the almost haunting intimacy of it all. The quiet horror of realizing that the unknown may have already touched you, left its mark, and buried the truth deep inside your mind, waiting for the right moment to finally surface. Whatever happened on that Maryland road in 1973, one thing is certain. Steve Kilburn never truly left it behind. The light, the fear, the cold metallic touch on his shoulder, they followed him, etched into his memory like a scar from another world. On the evening of October 11th, 1973, the quiet Mississippi fishing town of Pascagoula would become the setting for one of the most infamous and puzzling UFO abduction cases ever recorded. Two fishermen, Charles Hickson, 42, and Calvin Parker, only 19, set out for a simple night of fishing on the banks of the Pascagoula River. What began as a peaceful evening near the water would soon spiral into an event that neither man could ever explain, and an encounter that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The two men worked together at the nearby shipyard. Hickson, older and more seasoned, often acted as a mentor to Parker, who was quiet and shy by nature. That October evening, they chose a secluded spot along the riverbank, a place they'd fished many times before, away from town and away from lights and traffic. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the air was warm and still, the kind of southern night filled with the sounds of crickets and distant waves.
We were sitting on the other side of the pier with our feet, over toward the river, fishing in the river. And the fish still wasn't biting, so I told Calvin, I said, well, we might as well go on. But I guess that was when I heard it. It was some kind of zipping sound. And when I turned around, in this area out here, about 40 or 50 feet out there, It was some kind of craft, you know. It looked like it's going to come right onto the ground. But it came on down and hovered about a foot and a half or 2 feet off of the ground. We didn't know what to do, you know. The river behind us and that out there not knowing what it was. So, and then before we had time to really do anything, it seemed like an opening appeared. Toward the end, it was, you know, toward us. And the blue light, it had blue flashing lights as it was, you know, approaching the ground, but then they went out. And when the opening appeared, some source of light came from the inside. It was just almost blinding.
From the light emerged 3 beings.
Well, I kind of thought it was people at first, you know, off like that. But of course, when they appeared there in front of me, it was the most shock I've ever had in my life. They were shorter than me. I'd say about 5'2" or 3", and they didn't have a neck. Their head, it seemed to come directly to their shoulders, and they had something. It came out to a point about where a nose would be, and on each side the ears. And I believe that they looked like they were a little longer on the ears than the nose. But it seemed to me when they came out that doorway or that opening or whatever it was, then just almost instantly they were right there on us.
Their skin was gray and wrinkled like an elephant hide. Where hands should have been, there were claw-like pincers, and their heads were smooth and bulbous with pointed features. They floated rather than walked, moving with an uncanny, weightless motion. The beings took hold of both men and lifted them toward the craft. Neither could resist, their bodies limp and unresponsive. Inside, Hickson found himself in a small, sterile room illuminated by a soft, diffuse light. The air was heavy and metallic. A device descended in front of him.
When they carried me inside, they seemed to just lean me back, you know. And this eye, I keep referring to it as an eye, and it moved up in front of me, and it started right at my eyes, looking me right in the eye. And it seemed it hesitated there for a few seconds, and it just started moving over my entire body.
His mind swirled between fear and disbelief. Parker, meanwhile, drifted in and out of consciousness, completely overwhelmed by terror. The experience, though it felt like hours, lasted only moments. The next thing the men knew, they were standing back on the riverbank.
They didn't drop me, you know, they just released me back to the ground. And I fell. I don't know why my legs were weak. I don't know why it was the fright or what it was, but I fell onto the ground. And that's when I seen Calvin. He's standing right over here in this area, and he was standing facing the river with his arms outstretched like that, just like he was staring at something.
The strange craft rising silently into the skies until it vanished from sight. They were left trembling and disoriented. Their watches stopped, their bodies numb. Unsure of what to do, they sat in Hickson's car for nearly an hour, trying to just comprehend what had happened. Parker wanted to forget everything entirely and just go home. Hickson, however, felt compelled to report what had happened. Eventually, they drove to the nearby sheriff's office, where they told their story to Captain Glenn Ryder. Skeptical but intrigued, the deputies interviewed them separately, and the men's accounts matched almost perfectly, not only in detail, but in tone. Both appeared genuinely terrified. The men were brought back together in the same room and left alone for a period of time. Unbeknownst to them, the sheriff's office let a tape recorder run after the interview, hoping to catch the men in a lie once they were alone. Instead, the recording captured 2 frightened men struggling to make sense of what they'd seen. Here is the actual recording from the sheriff's office.
Jesus Christ. You hear about something like that, but you can't believe it.
Yeah, you hear that. I know. Yeah, I know.
Where is something the United States have up there?
No,
They wouldn't have done no
not what we seen. Not what we seen.
This season, I like had a heart attack tonight, ain't she? Well, I know. I come one down and she died. Scared me to death, too, so. I'm just laying there crying right now. I can't tell you. I know that. It's something that you can't get over in a lifetime, see? Jesus Christ. Most of them bad about it, nobody believes. That's what I thought. I had been through enough of hell on this earth, and now I have to go through something like that, see? But they could have, I guess they could have harmed us, son. They could have done anything to us if they didn't hurt me. Maybe why they just picked us up? I don't know. I'm telling you, man, I couldn't take much more than that. I passed out. That's the first time I ever passed out in my life. Except for new medical records. I ain't either. I'm assuming I kept it for my life. It's hard. You can't make people believe that, though. I don't know. I'm sitting here and believe it not, because I better wake up and start believing. Damn right. I wake up and start believing. Damn right. Damn blue lights, them son bitches are just like that to come out. Yeah, I know. You can't believe it. You can't make people believe it. I paralyzed right there. I couldn't believe it. They won't believe it on these days. They won't believe it on these days. Might be too late. I knew all along they was people from out of the world up there. I knew all along. I never thought it would happen to me.
As you could hear, their conversation was raw and emotional. Hickson spoke of the fear that still gripped him, while Parker prayed aloud for strength, insisting that no one would ever believe him. When the story broke in the press days later, Pascagoula was flooded with reporters. Hickson and Parker became instant media sensations. UFO investigators, psychologists, and skeptics descended on the small town, each eager to prove or disprove the story. Under hypnosis and polygraph testing, Hickson's account remained consistent. Parker, traumatized by the ordeal, avoided publicity and later suffered anxiety and nightmares for years to come. Investigators found physical evidence difficult to come by, but certain details lent credibility. Witnesses along the river reported seeing unusual lights in the sky that night. Law enforcement officers, initially skeptical, admitted that both men appeared deeply shaken, not the behavior of pranksters. Even skeptics found it difficult to explain away the recorded conversation, where fear and disbelief were unmistakably genuine. Over the years, the Pascagoula story refused to fade away. Hickson continued to speak publicly about the encounter, convinced that what he and Parker experienced was real. He would also describe additional strange incidents in his life afterward, unexplained lights, reoccurring dreams, and feelings of being watched. Parker, on the other hand, retreated from the public eye altogether, marrying and relocating several times to escape any media attention. Decades later, both men would independently reaffirm their experiences. Parker eventually would come forward to the public and explained that he had always feared ridicule. His retelling matched his original statement, suggesting that whatever happened that night had been seared permanently into his memory.
I really wouldn't say it was a severe nervous breakdown or anything, but it's just more stress than what I could handle because I had more things, going on, trying to make a living. I was getting married in that year, the same year, just about a month after this happened. And it's just so much pressure on me, I just couldn't stand it, so I pretty much stayed out of the media. And, there was a time or two that I had to go in the hospital on account of my nerves. And, I still have problems with my nerves.
The Pascagoula abduction endures as one of the most well-documented alien abductions ever on record. It's a story of two ordinary men caught in an extraordinary moment, a moment that defied every law of nature and reason that they understood. Skeptics still debate whether the event was a hallucination a shared delusion, or an elaborate hoax. But for Hickson and Parker, the truth was simple. Something came for them that night by the river. Something otherworldly and beyond understanding. In the years that followed, Hickson would say that the encounter changed him, not just through fear, but through a sense of perspective. He no longer looked at the night skies with curiosity alone, but with the knowledge that perhaps they were never truly alone to begin with. And on that quiet October evening in Pascagoula, under the still waters and the southern stars, the boundary between the known and the unknowable was crossed, leaving behind one of the most chilling mysteries in UFO history. Hey guys, Ryan Sprague here from Somewhere in the Skies. The podcast has always been and always will be completely free for you to listen to. But creating it every week takes a lot of time, research, and resources. And to be honest, it's just never been free for me to create. That's why we built a few simple ways for you to help support the show and keep it going strong. You can join us over on Patreon or through Apple Premium. Both offer the same awesome perks. Ad-free episodes, early access to new content, exclusive bonus shows, and even priority to ask our guests your listener questions. It's a quick and easy way to support what we do for just a few bucks a month. And right now, you can even try Patreon for free for a week to see if it's right for you. To learn more and to join, head over to patreon.com/somewhereskies. That's patreon.com/somewhereskies. Or hit that subscribe button right at the top of your Apple Podcast feed. Thank you so much for listening, for supporting, and as always, keep looking up. It was July 26th, 1976. Sandy Larson was driving toward Bismarck long before sunrise. The dashboard clock in her car read 3:42 a.m. as she followed the empty stretch of highway through the North Dakota plains. Her teenage daughter, Jackie, was half asleep in the passenger seat, and Jackie's boyfriend, Terry, dozed in the back. The plan was simple: reach Bismarck by morning for Sandy's real estate exam. Leaving early meant quieter roads and fewer distractions. Just darkness, open land, and the steady hum of the engine. They were somewhere near the midpoint of the drive when the sky lit up. But it wasn't lightning. The flash was too clean, too controlled. A low humming followed, not quite like thunder, more like vibration moving through the metal of the car. Sandy tightened her grip on the wheel as Jackie jolted awake and Terry leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. Ahead of them, a group of lights appeared. They hovered low and close, bright orbs that shimmered in a kind of haze. There were several of them, maybe 8 to 10, one larger than the rest. They seemed to pulse rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Sandy tried to keep the car straight, but the world suddenly was changing all around her. The movement, the noise, the lights, all stopped at once. The car and its passengers were locked in place, caught in a stillness so complete it felt like time had switched off. Then, everything jumped forward. The next thing they knew, the car was parked at a gas station 30 miles down the highway. The engine was idling smoothly. Jackie was sitting in the back seat again, and the clock now read 6:14 a.m. None of them could explain how they had gotten there, and no one spoke for a long time. Back in Fargo, North Dakota, the three of them avoided the topic altogether. Sandy returned to her daily routine, washing dishes and pretending the drive had ended normally. Jackie spent more time alone, listening to records. Terry stopped calling altogether. But the silence couldn't hold forever. Sandy began having vivid dreams of floating, of bright lights, of being in a white room with curved walls. She saw a figure standing nearby, tall, wrapped in a brown, leathery material that reminded her of cracked vinyl. Its limbs were segmented like a toy robot. Sandy would sometimes wake with a sense that she couldn't breathe. Jackie's sleep was troubled too. She looked pale and withdrawn, and both she and her mother avoided that highway entirely after that. 2 months later, Sandy decided to contact a psychologist named Leo Sprinkle, who had worked with people reporting unusual experiences. She didn't expect answers, but at least some kind of relief. Under hypnosis, Sandy described being lifted from the car without feeling the motion. She remembered rising upward through the roof and into a bright windowless room. A table waited there, metallic and smooth. The figure that she would later call the Meccano Mummy appeared beside her. It didn't move naturally. Its limbs pivoted and locked like mechanical parts. She recalled a cold mist sprayed over her chest, followed by the sharp pressure of a thin instrument inserted into her nose. The pain was sudden and overwhelming. Then, everything went black. And that's when Sandy found herself driving again. The car and road exactly as before. Jackie's regression session revealed similar fragments. She didn't recall floating, but remembered standing motionless outside the car, unable to move or speak. She saw her mother being lifted upward and disappearing into the light. Both Sandy and Jackie's accounts aligned in detail and timing, and Dr. Sprinkle recorded his observations carefully. When word of the hypnotic sessions spread, the story began to attract local attention. Newspapers ran headlines about a woman abducted by a robot-like being. Some people believed, but most people laughed it off. But Sandy ignored the noise. She was more disturbed by the consistency of her dreams and by the possibility that the event hadn't been unique. Childhood memories began resurfacing. A night she couldn't account for, a pet that went missing, flashes of light outside her bedroom window. The idea that something like this had happened before unsettled her more than anything. By the following year, the story entered UFO research circles. Investigators labeled the being the Meccano Mummy for its jointed, toy-like movements. They compared Sandy's case with other well-known abduction reports from the 1960s and 70s. Stories with similar details like bright lights, paralysis, examinations, and missing time. Some researchers viewed her account as evidence of a broader phenomenon. Psychologists were less convinced, suggesting sleep paralysis, stress, or hypnotic suggestion. The odd details, like the segmented arms, the nostril pain, the sterile smell, those were hard to explain. Over time, the case took on a second life as almost folklore. Skeptics and believers detailed it in articles and conferences. Some academics interpreted the mummy as symbolic, a product of cultural anxiety about machines and control. But for Sandy, it wasn't theory, it was experience. She didn't care what anyone called it. She just wanted it to not ever happen again. By the 1980s, she had moved to a smaller town near the Minnesota border. Jackie went off to college and eventually settled in California. The mother and daughter rarely discussed the event. Locals turned the story into legend, daring each other to drive that stretch of highway at night. A small roadside museum even built a crude model of the Meccano Mummy out of pipes and duct tape. Sandy never went to see it. She kept journals instead, notes about her dreams, sketches of lights, details of odd noises outside her home. Every so often, a flicker of movement in the sky would send her heart racing. Then, in 1991, she received a letter from a woman in Nebraska describing almost the same experience. Missing time, bright orbs, a tall figure with mechanical limbs. Sandy couldn't believe it. She wrote back once, simply saying that she understood. Then she burned the letter. Years passed, and while the story may have faded from newspapers, it never quite completely disappeared. It lived on in UFO databases, in books, in internet forums, and now on podcasts. For some, it was a curiosity from the golden age of abduction reports. For others, it remained one of the strangest, most specific accounts ever recorded. Sandy never stopped watching the skies. Even decades later, when she drove at night, she kept the radio low and her hands tight on the steering wheel. Every flicker of distant light drew her attention. She told no one about what she was thinking. She didn't need to, because some stories, once lived, refuse to let go. In the late 1970s, Italy became the setting for one of the strangest and most enduring UFO cases ever recorded. The encounters of Pier Zanfretta, a night watchman from Genoa. Zanfretta claimed not one, but 12 separate encounters with non-human entities over a span of 2 years. What began as a single frightening experience on a cold December night in 1978 would evolve into one of the most controversial and thoroughly investigated UFO stories in Europe. Before that night, Zanfretta was an ordinary man. He worked long shifts guarding private properties. He was respected by his colleagues as reliable and level-headed. Nothing in his background suggested he would become the center of a nationwide sensation. Italy, at the time, was in turmoil, politically unstable and economically strained, but also gripped by fascination with the unexplained. And that's when Zanfretta would take center stage. On December 6, 1978, while patrolling the quiet village of Torriglia, Zanfretta noticed lights flickering near a villa. Thinking it might be intruders, he drove closer. As he stepped into the courtyard, an enormous glowing oval-shaped craft loomed before him, casting an intense white light across the entire property. He froze. Out of the glare, towering figures emerged. Green-skinned beings over 10 feet tall, their faces dominated by large, yellow, triangular eyes. Understandably terrified, Zanfretta stumbled backward, then fled into the night. Moments later, he radioed his colleagues in a panic, shouting about enormous creatures and blinding objects in the sky. When backup arrived, they found him trembling, drenched, and incoherent. The scene itself bore strange clues, deep, unidentifiable footprints, each nearly half a meter long, pressed into the damp soil, and Geiger counters later revealed abnormal radiation readings. Several residents nearby reported seeing bright lights in the sky at the same time. The police investigation that followed was extensive but inconclusive. While many dismissed the story by Zanfretta, others, including his employers and several investigators, were struck by the sheer terror in his voice and the physical evidence left behind. Over the following months, Zanfretta's life unraveled into a spiral of bizarre experiences. He claimed that the same beings returned again and again, abducting him from his patrol routes, from his car, and even from his home. He described them in vivid, consistent detail: rough green skin streaked with red veins, metallic suits, and strange glowing devices. These beings would tell Zanfretta that they came from a distant planet called Titonia. Sometimes they performed medical procedures on him. Other times, they showed him visions. These visions were of Earth's possible future, or of vast alien worlds. On one occasion, after vanishing for hours, Zanfretta was found miles away from his assigned route, confused and freezing, with no memory of how he'd gotten there. In another account, he said he was taken to an underwater base, where the aliens kept human bodies in suspended tanks, studying them for unknown reasons. Whether real or imagined, these visions left him physically scarred and mentally exhausted. He suffered headaches, insomnia, and weight loss. Medical exams confirmed signs of trauma, but offered no clear explanation. To try to probe a little deeper, psychologists placed him under hypnosis. Each session produced the same story: vivid, emotional, unwavering. Observers noted that his pulse raced and his body trembled as he described these enormous captors. The consistency of his recollections impressed some researchers, including respected Italian ufologist Roberto Pinati, who considered the case one of the most credible on record. Yet skeptics were equally vocal, arguing that stress, isolation, or even sleep paralysis could account for Zanfretta's experiences. The evidence left investigators torn. His car was once found idling on a remote hillside, headlights blazing, its electrical system apparently affected by some unknown interference. Radiation spikes at multiple sites deepened the mystery. Still, no definitive proof could be found. No photographs, no physical artifacts beyond the footprints and the readings. The story lingered in some sort of limbo, impossible to verify, yet equally impossible to dismiss. Italian media seized on the tale, transforming Zanfretta into both a celebrity and a target. Television crews followed him. Newspapers sensationalized every new claim. He faced ridicule from skeptics and strangers, harassment from unknown callers, and pressure from employers embarrassed by all of the attention. Yet he never backed down. Each time he spoke publicly, his story, it remained the same. To many Italians, he became an almost tragic figure, a man haunted by something that he could not explain and punished for refusing to deny it. Across Italy, strange reports of lights surged. Others claimed similar encounters, suggesting something larger might be at play. International researchers also took note, comparing Zanfretta's experience to the cases like Travis Walton. Both Zanfretta and Travis Walton described being taken aboard a craft, and both faced widespread disbelief and both showed signs of trauma. The parallels only deepened the intrigue. Psychologists who studied the case proposed alternate theories: hallucinations caused by exhaustion, stress-induced delusions, or repressed memories surfacing as vivid imagery. Yet none could explain the footprints, the radiation, or the multiple witnesses who saw lights. Even decades later, the debate continues between those convinced Zanfretta truly encountered beings from another world and those who see the saga as a manifestation of psychological distress. Regardless of where the truth lies, the Zanfretta encounters became a cornerstone of Italian UFO lore. His story inspired books, documentaries, and fictionalized retellings, cementing its place in pop culture. In Italy, his name is still synonymous with the country's most famous alien abduction case. For UFO researchers, it remains a vital case study, both complex and detailed, and hauntingly unresolved. More than 40 years later, the question still hangs in the air. What really happened to Pier Zanfretta on those cold, dark patrols? Whether his visitors came from the stars or from the depths of his own mind, the mystery endures. A chilling reminder that some stories, no matter how impossible, just refuse to fade away. By the close of the 1970s, the idea of alien abduction had moved far beyond the fringe, and it had entered the collective psyche. Researchers, psychiatrists, and believers struggled to reconcile these strange new accounts with science, while skeptics dismissed them as dreams or delusions. Yet for the witnesses, the experiences were all too real. The physical marks, the psychological scars, and a lifetime of unanswered questions. Whether viewed as evidence of an unseen intelligence or the mirror of our own subconscious fears, these encounters left a lasting mark on modern folklore. The stories of Kilburn, Larson, Hickson, Parker, and Zanfretta remind us that during the turbulent decade, the distance between the ordinary and the otherworldly seemed to vanish. If for just a brief moment, humanity stood face to face with something it could not yet explain. Each story, in its own way, captures the tension of a world on the edge of revelation. A world learning that the unknown doesn't always appear in the sky, but often within the minds and memories of those who dare to look up. The 1970s ended, but its mysteries never did, echoing through the decades as whispers from the stars, and even whispers within ourselves. This episode was researched and written and produced by me, Ryan Sprague. Special thanks to our podcast network, Spectre Vision Radio. Please take just a few moments to rate and review Somewhere in the Skies on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also see and hear our episodes on YouTube. Subscribe to the Somewhere in the Skies YouTube channel. Links for everything are in the show notes. If you have a UFO story you'd like to share on the show, feel free to reach out to me personally. Our email is in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, keep your feet on the ground, but never stop searching somewhere in the skies.
Somewhere in the Skies is part of the Somewhere podcast universe. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. To learn more about all of our shows, visit thespu.com.
Spectre Vision Radio.